Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 6 sessions. Sorry, it was a little bit late. That wasn't entirely my fault, but we had a little bit of technical difficulties. And I'm just saying it wasn't the guy who works at the tech company. I'm going to start off by saying I'm excited for this one. Over the past 2 years, doing the 6 sessions has been my favorite part of the week, getting to speak openly, sometimes too openly, and with some of the people I find most interesting in the growth space. And today's guest is a man who knows a thing or two about growth, but not the everyday growth we normally play with in a sales and marketing capacity, which is what's going to make this, for me anyway, going to make this conversation more interesting. Today, we're going to talk about growth through education, and we're going to talk about the rise of community through learning. For those of you who've jumped into the HubSpot Academy in the past, you will recognize this man. He's one of the OG professors who built the Academy into what it is today. Some may even say he's HubSpot's very own Clark Kent lookalike, and by some, I mean me. Kevin, thanks for joining us and welcome to this week's 6 sessions.
Thanks, Rich. Obviously, big fan of the series. So excited to finally, grind you down. You're really scraping the bottom of the barrel with me coming on. And you know what? I knew the Clark Kent piece was going to come in. Purposely didn't wear glasses to try and, can I skirt that? But I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for trying to throw me off the rhythm. But I'm not finished with my introduction yet, though, because I do have nicer things to say to you. I don't necessarily mean all of them, but I'll go through some of them.
Right.
So today's session is all about learning.
Pockets. Yeah, I lined your pockets.
So, yeah, of course. So today's session is all about learning, but what I'm really interested in is how HubSpot managed to turn education into revenue, and more importantly, how that turned into community, it spawned dozens of cult heroes, of which Kevin sits at the top of the pile. We're going to talk about podcasts and building content that pulls on more than just your own sphere of knowledge. We'll talk project management, and there will be probably some discussion around goats. And all that to the one side, he may be the very first person I've spoken to who actually studied marketing and became a marketer. Joining us from Deluxebury, Massachusetts, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Kevin Dunn. You impressed that I got that reference?
Yeah. Who did you have to sync with to get that piece in there?
I can't give you my sources.
Really, that's a fair regionalized reference. But yeah, it's good to be here.
It was Justin Gracie. So to kick off, let's start with an easy one. Would you rather Tom Brady did one last season for the Pats, or you can only watch Mark Wahlberg fields for the next 10 years?
All right, good question. It's actually a fairly easy one. Simply because I think I already only watch Mark Wahlberg movies. Therefore, give me one more year of Tom, the GOAT, bring him home, probably raise an 8th championship for him. And so that's an easy one. Absolutely.
Nice. He's going to run out of fingers soon, so you have to retire, right?
No. Well, actually, they just announced the home opener. He's coming back. They're going to celebrate him. It's going to be great. I'll pay whatever price required to get in there for that.
Nice. I appreciate the fandom. So Q1 was wild across a lot of industries and probably most notably in tech. How was Q1 for you?
I think, we obviously navigated the same turbulence as everyone else. So I'm sure a lot of similarities there, but I think at least through Academy and HubSpot, fairly successful Q1. I think a lot of the strategic planning at the tail end of last year teed us up for a really productive Q1. We had some really great launches. Meg Duffy on the partner education team on Academy launched HubSpot architecture certification. I'm sure we can get into tech education in maybe we'll talk about it a little later. But really, really big flagship launch for us. Established some major inroads in extracting the knowledge of subject matter experts around HubSpot for our content. We're folding in a huge emphasis of having partners as part of the curriculum that we're building. So excited for some of the stuff there. But honestly, man, that's all to say that, the wheel got jerked for us too in this explosion of generative AI and GPT-4. And so just trying to figure out what that all means. I mean, I think, just like everyone else, we're trying to figure it out too. But by all accounts, a good Q1.
So for those who don't know, what does HubSpot do? We'll dig into the Academy bit as well, but like HubSpot in general, what does HubSpot do? I'm always intrigued to see how people remember the party line on this as well. So I am testing you.
Yeah, man, I don't know if I have the boilerplate, but how I would define HubSpot, it's a CRM platform, right, with deeply powerful software across marketing, sales, customer success, operations. But I think beyond just that product, There's also a thriving ecosystem of managed services providers, a passionate community, a healthy chunk of which are certified power users of HubSpot. There's obviously free education tied to it, and a marketplace of like 1,400 or so integration. So it's, a really deeply powerful but user-friendly product and platform, but a really, really big ecosystem packaged all around it as well.
And what's your role at HubSpot? Perfect. Yeah. You tick the box of CRM platform and kind of went deep on the market. So I think the only thing you missed was inbound. So you missed the circa 20,000 people coming for a.
That's right. Yeah. And
otherwise,
a monstrous event. Yes.
Solid B plus.
B plus. Honestly, that passes. So my role at HubSpot, I'm on the HubSpot Academy team. The official title, Senior Manager of Education, but basically what that means. Lead the folks responsible for creating our solutions partner education, our developer education, both CMS development and CRM development, and technical education. So start to branch out into, data modeling and APIs and architecture and some of that stuff too. So those teams, those folks, those content creators is who I lead. And again, driving the strategy for HubSpot Academy.
So the thing that's always I've always found super interesting and always kind of wanted to scratch the surface on you is, so they're over the past 12 months, we've seen RevOps explode. We've seen AI generative, everywhere you look, there is ChatGPT and kind of Jasper and all those kind of things being floated around. The launch, finally the launch of GA4. Mm-hmm. How do you guys actually stay on top of that, but not just deliver a watery level layer of content? So the content is very good. The learning, I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass, but the content from an education standpoint, we use it to help onboard and develop our own team members as part of our PDP process. But that is how do you guys stay abreast of where the industry actually is and then build content around that? Because it's huge. And it's not just that as well, right? You've got the hubs themselves are releasing features that you have to then train and educate people on. How do you stay up with that?
Yeah, I think it's easier said than done, but we have some intentional strategies and processes to help us try and make that a reality, right? Because to your point, we have plenty of product education that we need to keep relevant and accurate. But then there's also these strategies and tactics that are tangential to the product that are equally as valuable for HubSpot users to know, or anybody to know. And those are evolving all the time, right? And so, we consider content updates just as important, and it factors into our prioritization process the exact same way as net new or catalog growth would. So we prioritize it equally. But honestly, I think what it comes down to, Rich, is we have an instructional design methodology. It's ADDIE. It's a fairly common one in the industry for customer education. And the A in ADDIE is analysis. And so it's actually a fairly robust step. And before we even start to design what a curriculum should be, net new or update, actually developing the content, okay, it's a very comprehensive and thorough research and analysis process. What's changed? What's emerging? What do we need to rethink? And so a lot of that heavy lifting happens at that phase. And that's why it's so critical, because to your point, things can change and move so fast. But honestly,
what?
Oh, go ahead.
So I was just what goes into that analysis phase for you guys? How do you actually, what data set are you pulling in to actually go, hang on, this is the direction we should be looking?
Yeah, absolutely. And so thankfully, we work with a number of incredibly intelligent colleagues. And we also have a highly intelligent ecosystem of partners where, the channels are there for us to keep a pulse and to understand, how certain changes or how certain trends in the industry are going to impact our learners and our product and the folks that want to execute on these strategies. And so honestly, it's very collaborative, and we invite in, the identified subject matter experts. Our professors don't have to be the end all be all keeper of the knowledge. They just need to know where and how to find it, speak to those that do have it, and making sure it can get packaged into, educational content that yields the intended learning outcomes. So it's extraction from SMEs. But again, there's also some thorough research you can look at, online and do the appropriate industry publication searches and things like that. But honestly, man, it comes down to collaboration with those that have that knowledge.
So I'm totally gonna go off piece with my questions and we'll end up talking about them. But so what I'm interested in is, how do you then go all right, this course was successful? Like what to you guys is like, okay, we've nailed the direction we want to go in. How do I then go, yeah, that was worthwhile?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different dimensions to it. I would say the first is just sentiment from the learners, right? So for any course, any certification that we build, we're going to attach a survey at the end, and we're going to solicit feedback from those that just completed the survey, right? And we look at that a ton, and we lean on it a ton to determine how do we improve our processes or content types or formats overall, but then also acutely for that one learning experience, that course, right? And so I think the learner sentiment, the feedback, customer satisfaction, how helpful was it? We synthesize that. And so that's one barometer. I also think too, beyond how the learner feels, we can also look at some of the metrics for like the experience, right? How many people enrolled in the course? And then what is like the conversion funnel? Like what does the flow look like through the lessons, right? Is there a major drop-off point? Are folks reaching the end of the course as intended? And then does that pull through to like, passing scores, right? Are they taking the exam? Are they passing the exam? And so we look at some of that too, and that'll give us a good baseline. And then I think at the end of the third one, Rich, is like impact on business, right? Are we seeing growth in certifications? Are those certifications moving the needle positively to things like, tool adoption of what's covered in the course? Are we seeing, customers that have that certification amongst their team? Are they sticking around longer? Are they healthier accounts? Are they finding more success through the utilization of HubSpot? So we'll tie it to some of those business metrics as well.
And how do you align those metrics with some of like the other more historically well established or kind of more like the teams like sales and marketing, right? We've got some straight up KPIs, like the things we're targeting. Yes, we've got shared metrics and there's newer ways of looking at them. Is the MQL there? Is it not? But how do you align the metrics that you are chasing with the overall business metric? Is there kind of like a crossover? You saying is like the CRO, is somebody coming to you saying, these are the metrics that we're focusing on as a business? How are you then influencing those?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? I mean, so HubSpot Academy, just org chart wise, we live on the marketing department of HubSpot, but the content that we package and build in the Academy app is very much built in a way to not be marketing, right? We're not trying to pitch you. We're not trying to just hammer home the value propositions of this or that. It's strictly and purposefully like educational content to help you achieve whatever goals or outcomes you're looking for, right? But that doesn't discount the fact that we can also plug into some of those like historical standard marketing metrics that measure performance, right? Really powerful lead gen tool. And so we can keep an eye on how, acquisition numbers and lead generation funnel through Academy, either as a direct source or influence otherwise. Like we have that and we track that, and then revenue attribution, again, it's another input to that model. And then from like the sales perspective, like, we have the data and we can point to it when leads or users or customers engage with HubSpot Academy. And I would say this is too, probably inclusive of any SaaS company that has an education platform can probably tell this story too. But it's because it's not, it's not revolutionary, but folks that engage with education, shorten sales cycles, close at a higher rate, tend to buy more, stick around longer, right? So it informs and influences all the key sales metrics as well. So anyways, not marketing content, but it plugs into those standard marketing and sales metrics, like any other programs would.
Honestly, it's like, what's the opposite of kryptonite? And that's not like a reference back to the Clark Kent reference either, but like what? So it's like catnip, right? In a sales process, when we are competitive selling against some of like the comparative platforms, we can then talk about, well, actually go and do some of these courses. Like you can understand the platform. You don't have to listen to what we're saying about it. Go and learn them, play with them. And you couple that with a demo portal or a trial, those things start to become way more impactful. And like we typically see people kind of move across. If you had to pick, what for you is like the most important KPI that you are kind of focused on?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right, we know, and we kind of bulleted out those metrics that certifications and education, like engagement with education, what those can actually inform. And so to realize all of those measurements of success, we need to get more people in the Academy app and engaging with it, right? And so I think like at a very high level, a really important, like two really important numbers for us are just obviously active users, the growth in acquisition, the growth in the pool of users in Academy, but also how many customers and how many HubSpot accounts have certified users, at least 1+ certified user. And if those two things continue to grow, those will be the leading indicators for some of those other maybe lagging indicators. So anyways, growth and academy adoption, accounts with certified users is a big one.
So I know you're like the real genius behind the HubSpot Academy. I know you're humble, but I'll say it for you.
I wish I could take more of that credit than like I'm at best like the personality hire. You know what I mean? Like, hey, he's a fun guy to have around, but
So the HubSpot Academy's eye candy done. It's fun, mate. Just
right.
It.
Yeah, it's rolled Kevin out. All right, yep.
But what is the impact of HubSpot's Academy on the overall like HubSpot's growth? Like, what has it done for HubSpot?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different things, right? I think, it's literally built on the original inbound methodology and like those guiding principles of you want to help, you want to provide value before you necessarily extract it, right? And HubSpot Academy is free, and you never have to be somebody with the intent to purchase to see the value. And so I think, being able to really reinforce those types of principles has been important. And again, we talked about just like the moat and the pool, right? The ecosystem that we can grow, the community of HubSpot users that we can grow. But I think we also, help that ecosystem that we're growing navigate a lot of those industry changes, right? And I think that has downstream impact for the growth of HubSpot, right? Like, we're not the only input, but we are an input to overarching methodology changes. We moved from a funnel to a flywheel, right? The importance of customer centricity. And so HubSpot Academy can be an important asset to help guide, other users and businesses through that shift. It could also get super tactical and like, SEO evolved a couple years back, and where, you should really be doing pillar pages. And then there's a linking strategy for topic clusters. Like, okay, that reinvented content marketing. And so Academy is trying to help pull customers through that. Community-led growth is another one. I think, in the not so distant future, helping folks navigate implications and efficiency gains to be found in generative AI. So a lot of these like industry shifts and larger narratives, HubSpot Academy can help support. And then honestly, at the end of the day too, there's a lot of opportunities for interlocks, right? To help other programs. The old adage at HubSpot is 1 + 1 = 3, right? It's not just, the value of two things, but when you bring them together, it's even more so. And so you look at the Academy presence at inbound, you think about HubSpot user groups and the opportunity to fold in, Academy professors into that programming. You think about the Dan Tyre boot camps. And so, there's just a lot of different interlocks that can pull through to growth. So anyways, a little verbose there for you, Rich, but a couple different ways I think we impact the growth.
So if I were to, from an outside looking in perspective, if I would go, okay, what actually made HubSpot, because like HubSpot was going into a very competitive market, particularly in the now CRM space. And if I start to look back at, okay, what has helped, I'd say like two things. And like part of this is biased as well, but I would say the HubSpot Academy, like that free education is incredibly powerful, particularly when you are looking at the more junior or kind of mid-level marketers coming through, because they become more senior and they have a preference for tools, and they are the ones often doing the research. And I would say like the partner community as well, that partner-led growth and the education-led growth are the things that I think have set out HubSpot from like the other players in the market.
I think just free education, it's a major differentiator, right? And I think when it was spun up, the Mark Killen's era and some other folks, like that wasn't the standard across SaaS, especially. I think we've now, we've started to see it trend towards that, but like very much a key differentiator for that period of growth. And we've now established a fairly sizable moat around having that, right? And that's your point too, like the partner-led growth is a good call. And, now we're starting to see, based on the maturity of the Academy, we're branching out into some of those other personas, right? We have dedicated training gated exclusively for partners. We have content dedicated specifically to developers, right? We're localizing the content, expanding it for non-native English speakers. So, there's a lot of different elements of growth there too.
I think it's obvious. I'm a massive believer in education and coaching. The guest I had last week, Peter, he believes in the kind of role of the sales leadership to be much more of a coach, and as part of that, you're like stop pitching and focus more on kind of coaching prospects to be more successful. So I'm a big believer in that strategy, like the whole kind of GTM strategy being around education and learning. But where, in your opinion, would somebody start? So like if I'm at an organization and I'm going to the C-suite, how am I going to convince them that it's the right move? Because there's a huge investment that goes into that and a leap of faith as well.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, I think if you asked that question a couple years back, it'd be like, man, yeah, it's an uphill battle, right? It's a really, really difficult conversation to have, to just upfront validate the ROI you're going to see. I think for SaaS specifically, but even more broadly, I don't think that pitch is as hard as it once was. I think a lot of companies are probably already thinking about it. I think more generally, we already understand that, like, yeah, the trust in salespeople, in marketing messaging, like it's diminishing, right? And so it's like, all right, how do you get rid of the overtly sales? To your point, become more of a coach, a helpful hand, right? A shepherd to guide them on what they're trying to do. But anyways, I think to sell it, it very much starts with a much larger conversation on like learning culture, right? Like building an academy, right? A customer or partner education program. That's definitely one input. But again, the company at a high level has to also believe in the value and importance of just education more broadly. So I think that's the big thing. But honestly, it's also not unlike maybe any other program you want to pitch. You got to identify the executive sponsor that's going to have the biggest sway, right? You're going to understand what matters to that person, what metrics matter the most to the business, what are the key signals of business success and customer health, and then paint the picture of how, education will move the needle on those, right? More granularly, what you're going to package and build, how that decision was informed, and how you're going to measure it, right? I think that's the playbook.
So pre-pandemic, you were, I would say, an ever-present in the HubSpot office, often found at the juice bar and espresso bar as well. How was the transition to remote for you? Think you'd ever go back?
Loved going into the office. The energy was palpable. It was awesome to just like collaborate, get some smoothies, get some coffee, obviously. But a couple years back, like everybody else, we had to make the move, and we're gonna go remote first, and everyone's got to be distributed remote. We enabled our professors. We sent them the necessary equipment. We redesigned our processes, our kind of collaboration methods. And hey, this function is going to be able to be executed completely remote, right? So we reframed it. And honestly, we found success in doing so. We found comfort in doing so. And so it's your question about going back, like when there's opportunities to do so. But I think I'm officially fully remote. Right. I think there's an even playing field, right? I think everyone's on Zoom now. And candidly, once the pandemic hit and we all moved remote, I stopped geofencing, commutable distance to Cambridge, Massachusetts as a means for hiring for my team. And so we've started to expand and add folks from across the United States, from across the world. And so even if I go back into the office, I'll probably have a day full of Zooms anyways, right? So it's like, I think, honestly, it's fundamentally changed, at least for me in the Academy team. And I don't know if there's necessarily going back to the way it was 100%,
So just as so we were last in, actually I saw you, the last time I saw you in the HubSpot office was just before pandemic. And like it was in the March, just as things were kicking off. And we had a meeting with a HubSpot that was booked in, and we went to the HubSpot room, and then they zoomed into the HubSpot office as well. So it was kind of like a glimpse into the post-pandemic future.
Yeah, literally. But I mean, it doesn't come without growing pains. And it's like, yeah, how do you foster the same level of camaraderie and connection and like, off the cuff collaboration and ideation, right? I mean, I think, you jump into a Zoom with anybody in any use case and it's fairly transactional. And so like, it takes a lot of work to still pull through a lot of those cultural elements. But again, man, it's like culture's the people, not the place. So, you can pull it through.
I think the one thing I miss is and I miss the idea of it, not necessarily the practice of it, is the quick, like Friday afternoon, should we go and grab a beer? Like that's the like post works, like just hanging out, and there's nothing, you haven't have to organize it. It's just, okay, well, let's just do this thing because we're all here. That's the only bit I think I miss.
And I think that's maybe the biggest gap in that. I know this was like a huge thing in pandemics, like virtual happy hours. Like that's the one element that doesn't pull through. Yeah. The ad hoc beers after work, like, that's the sacrifice. Yeah. But again, man, pros versus cons. And it's like, if that's the sacrifice for everything else, maybe it's worth it.
My favorite was the like hanging out with family and friends and having drinks with them on Zoom. And I'm like, I don't like hanging out with most of you in like when we're face to face. I want to do this on a Zoom call. Anyway,
like if it wasn't the pandemic, we wouldn't be hanging out on a Tuesday night. Like we wouldn't be doing it anyway. So yeah.
So staying on the pandemic for a sec. So the pandemic saw like a huge spike in appetite for online learning, like everybody, like Udemy and masterclassing and all that kind of stuff. Presumably HubSpot saw a huge spike at that point. Has that tapered off? Has it maintained? Like, where's that gone post-pandemic?
Yeah, so I don't think it's a surprise, right? Many other companies probably saw it. Many other education platforms probably saw it. But like, yeah, I think what we had as a baseline in the 12 months leading up to the pandemic was that. And then, we saw a spike and it climbed. And so there's a spike in demand and interest. We saw it in the Academy team. We saw it in interest in certifications. And so we saw growth in those numbers too. But honestly, it's been exciting to watch that it was more so a new baseline that we saw where we continued on that path of incremental growth versus a temporary spike. And then we came back down to earth. So excitingly, the engagement and the excitement for HubSpot Academies it spiked, and that was the new floor for us. So it's exciting times.
Good. How did you get into growth? Like, where did the initial interest come from?
I don't know if anybody charts it with intention. I think, you see opportunities for like deep collaboration and like cross-functional work. I think you can, the balance between like, all right, really high level, high altitude strategic planning and like long-term strategy planning, but then balancing it with an equal opportunity for like real tactical project management, task execution, things like that. The speed that it can happen, right? Like the real action orientation, space for innovation and experimentation. Like, let's go test something out, see if it plays out. It's like all those things naturally were attractive to me. And so I think that's kind of what pushed me over into this realm. And then specifically for HubSpot Academy, it presented all of those opportunities, like those things that for me would bring me energy, but then also you get to do it through video content creation, right? And educational content creation, which I think is it's fun. It's a cool place to be. So there's a good balance.
But your background is customer success, and you even played around on the agency side for a bit. Yeah. So how did you actually end up at HubSpot?
Yeah. So started in the agency world. Ended up kind of the last stage there, just managing the folks that were, are like the white glove clients, like the strategic accounts, like managing the folks that would do the production and implementation for those folks. But I mean, you'd be hard pressed to not be working for a marketing agency in Boston and not just have a continued eye on a company like HubSpot, right? And this was like 2016. Yeah. And so they had an opening on their success team for channel consultants, which are the account managers and the consultants for agencies. So it felt like a fairly like a good fit, like a transfer of skills. So yeah, I was able to join the partner success team for a little while and, loved the one-to-one relationships you can build with partners, right? And the consultation and the conversation that you can have there. But then when an academy opening happened where they were looking for a professor, right, a curriculum developer for partner content, it was like, whoa, I can do a lot of the same one-to-one consulting, but it's actually through a megaphone. Like it's one to many. And all I would hear each day is all these cool things that partners are doing and what they've operationalized and like how they're navigating these scale points. It's like, dude, let's just put a microphone in front of that and let it reach a wider network, right, of partners. And so that was kind of the flow for me, and obviously been at the Academy team ever since. So
you run a podcast, Agency Unfiltered. How did that come about?
Smash the subscribe. Yep. Yeah. How did it start, or what was
the one of the upcoming speakers? I think is quite a good one. Recent.
Yeah. There's So it's actually 2023. It's been a good year for the podcast. Couple really good episodes. They're all great, But I think like ones that have stood out over the last couple months, we obviously had Yamini on, so HubSpot CEO. And it was great to just get her, take on the partner program, the success HubSpot seeing, the continued investments HubSpot wants to make, guidance around like where partners should be operating and like where the ecosystem's going. And we talk about AI and some other things. So that was awesome. And then, Paul Raitzer from the Marketing AI Institute, right as the explosion of Chat GPT, especially, and getting a take on what are the implications and ramifications. I mean, he's been driving that conversation for a long time. So that's another good one. And, next week, actually, Sam Banks from Fulius is coming on the show, and we're going to really unpack that whole accreditation strategy. And so it's like what goes into that and what that can mean for a partner business. So yeah, man, it's listen, any success, any value listeners find in that podcast, it has zero to do with me. And it's more so just finding the right folks to put a microphone in front of. Right.
But how did the idea come about?
Yeah. I mean, again, I joined the Academy team with this notion that partners want to learn and hear from other partners on like how they're doing it. Partners that have seen the movie and, others are trying to navigate it themselves. We heard that feedback loud and clear. Partners want to learn from other partners. And at the time, there wasn't a great forum for that to occur, right? It was ad hoc at best. And so I thought, a series, some sort of web series where we interview partners, right? Owners, founders, and executives, and just let them tell their story on the things that they've done to unlock scale. And just get that on a consistent basis. And honestly, man, it started as a Facebook Live. That was my big pitch. Remember Facebook Live? And I was like, dude, we're going to do this. Yeah. It's going to be an hour. We're going to fly these partners into our studio. And it was going to be a super production, like high production thing. And obviously it's very much pivoted over time. And so we found the scale of it to just the perfect fit is audio, interviews, podcasts, weekly cadence, quick production. But yeah, man, at the end of the day, it was just trying to resolve the feedback we heard from partners. They want to learn from other businesses. And honestly, that's also, I think, one of the big drivers of like a community-led growth strategy, right? Like folks just want to hear from others.
And do you approach the stuff that you do with the Academy with the intent to foster that community piece as well?
I would say yes. Right. I mean, obviously we want to be able to, develop the community, grow it, right? Allow folks to have demonstratable expertise in certain pockets, certify them on certain elements. But I think a really big point of emphasis, I think we talked about it super quick at the top, but it's how do we factor in a diverse range of perspectives and voices in our content, right? And so it's like, yeah, if we're going to teach partners about any particular aspect, all right, programmable email and like the personalization capabilities that unlocks, we can say what it can do, but I think it's going to be even more so valuable when we pull in somebody who's done it, who's seen it, can speak to the real world scenario, how they uncovered the opportunity and like actually real results that it yielded. And so that's a big point of emphasis in the curriculum development process. And again, I think it, points back to this idea of fostering that community and peer-to-peer learning and facilitation.
So you like spend most of your time speaking to agencies, you're building content, like you have your finger on the pulse of like kind of what's going on in the industry, in the space that we're working in. What do you think is the most important growth play for companies at the moment?
Yeah. I mean, now this might be specific to folks in the HubSpot ecosystem, but I think it's especially true. But I think actually it came out of inbound too, the importance of connection, right? And so maybe I'll hone in on this idea of a connected platform. I think this is going to be critical for services providers and consultants to help others navigate, but for any business to take a real hard look at the tech stack that they have, right? Pandemic brought us all online, the proliferation of software and point solutions and tools. And you really need to make sure, right, that system is usable, adoptable by the team. It tells the full picture. It surfaces and manifests the data that you needed to, right? It provides the holistic perspective of the customer journey across your business, across all the touch points that they may have, the sales process, the marketing collateral or whatever that they've engaged with, self-service knowledge or customer, support documentation, the touch points with whoever their point of contact, like you need that full visualization. And so for anybody that doesn't have a tech stack that enables that, right? Shared data across all those teams, like that's going to be a blocker for growth. And so anyways, there's a broader narrative here about connection and how to fight that crisis of disconnection. I think a really important piece is the platform element, right? And having a tech stack that's going to work the way you need it to.
Why didn't you tell me that when I asked you what HubSpot is?
So, I know. Yeah. Well, HubSpot certainly could help you with some of that,
I agree. It's that not just so that the other place for us where HubSpot typically wins when it's competitive is when we actually start to go through like this is a coherent platform that allows your teams to be connected. So it's not just about the tech connection, because obviously platform play, you can stitch things in the back, very nice to use, blah, blah, blah. Actually being able to be connected as teams across the platform, I think that's where that play comes in.
I mean, we've heard a lot of friction all the time, right? And again, this is going to, for folks, I don't know, tuning in, but bear with me if it's a B2B example and not relevant for everybody. But, the friction that a handoff from a sales rep who is like, they're just looking for the close one. They just need to wrap that puppy up. And then it comes over to the success team to start the account manager, build the plan, whatever it is, implement the plan. And like the notes are lacking. There's not a ton of context. And like all of a sudden the success team is asking questions that the sales rep had already asked themselves. And so like, that's a crummy experience in the handoff for that customer. Like your tech stack, your platforms, like that should solve for that. And so any past conversations, right? Any historical context, it should automatically be flowing through, right? So the next team just picks it up from there, right? Huge.
How are you on the Academy side using generative?
Yeah. Well, you asked like, what's the big growth lever or like, what should folks be looking at? I mean, generative AI, I think is the other answer to that question naturally. I think like everybody else, we're trying to tinker, we're trying to explore, we're experimenting. It's no secret that it represents efficiency gains, right? And like, being able to more like have a streamlined approach for streamlined process for content. And so I think that's even true for educational content. We talked about research and analysis, right? How can we leverage, generative AI to help us, with another input to that? How can we help consolidate or apply concision, to some robust notes? How can we have it, help us with learning outcome creation, exam question creation, scenario-based or case-based examples or exam questions to pull in. So, I mean, yeah, man, we're trying to figure out where and how it plugs in actually to that ADDIE methodology we talked about. So
is it part of your general workflow, like your personal workflow now?
It definitely is. I was, maybe we'll get to this, but for World Certification Week next week, I want to present partners with a tool to help, track and assign certifications for accreditations, knowing that there's, prerequisite certs that these partners need to complete. And I know it can be difficult at times, like the administration and maintenance of all of that. Yep. And so anyways, I wanted to do some formulas and some conditional formatting to check off like, oh, you have enough that satisfies the criteria. So yeah, man, like, generative AI spits out the formula. All I had to do is tell it what I was trying to have the spreadsheet do. And boom, I don't know how long that would have taken me. So like even little micro gains like that, huge.
So opening the door for a shameless plug here, World Cert Day next week. What is it and how can people get involved?
Yeah, man. So I know I kind of teed you up to tee me up for the shameless plug, but it's our fourth year doing this. So it's the fourth annual World Certification Week. And the long and short of it is that HubSpot's prepared to donate $5 US for every certification that's awarded to a user all next week, Monday through Friday. And we will be taking those donations and, giving them to educational oriented nonprofits and charities across the world, right? So Teach for All in America, Teach for Japan. There's, I think, Children's Wishing Well in Southeast Asia. I think there's like an Indigenous Literacy Foundation for Australia and New Zealand. And so our goal is $50,000 donated to these charities. And again, it's under the idea that we should be developing ourselves and our teams and having, prioritization around education, but also finding ways to increase access and equitable, opportunities for education around the world. So I'm a huge fan. I love World Certification Week. Partners always show up. Customers always show up. But anyways, man, World Cert Week next week. May 15 through 19.
So we have so once a quarter we have a certification day where the team down tools and just go deep on all of their certs.
Yeah.
And we've managed to align it with next week as well. So our team will be trying to cost you some money for the to donate.
Right.
So
right. It's
you're
not
a big
your money.
sports guy.
Force HubSpot, we have a goal set, like, force HubSpot to max out that goal. That'd be huge. What certs are you taking?
Sorry, what was that? You broke up. I couldn't hear you there.
What certifications are you taking next week?
There are a couple that I need to double back on. There was one that I favorited the other day because you asked me to. I can't remember which one that was, but yeah, probably that one.
Probably one of my favorites.
I typically go through and look for the Carl Jepsen ones.
Yeah, understood. I mean, as you should. To be honest, as you should. Dude's a rock star.
So you're a big sports guy. How much of that do you think comes into your working life? Like, I don't mean like that typical tech pro persona of just speaking in sports analogies, like white line fever, get it over the line, kind of scrimmaging and all that kind of stuff. But do you but in the way that you approach how you work, or like coaching, training, the way you work in a team, do you think that influences it?
I hope I'm not overly tech bro. I don't think so. Hopefully my team also agrees with that sentiment.
You're not wearing Patagonia, so you do.
That's true. That's true. I know I'm rocking the brand today. I don't know if the camera's, Academy, you got to rock it. But I don't know. I think it manifests in a couple different ways. I think it definitely shows up as competitiveness, not like in a bad way, right? I don't think it's overly aggressive, but commitment to winning and doing the best you can. I think that definitely comes into play. I also think it informs, man, like how I approach feedback, right? Like, I want to be coached. I'm open to coaching, right? I think equal parts, what are the strengths that I should be leaning into? But I mean, what are the things I need to fix? What are the opportunities for improvement, right? Like, openness to feedback and coaching, I think, stems from kind of, interest in involvement in sports. I think it also informs the way maybe I manage others, right? And building out a strength-based culture, like a balanced team, but a cohesive team, right? The sum of all parts. I don't know, and maybe the last piece, I won't belabor on it too long, but like being able to navigate ups and downs, right? Like, don't let the highs bring you too high. Don't let the lows bring you too low. Like, heartbreak championship losses in sports, like, it prepares you for some of that stuff, as do, championship wins, which we know Boston has had an immense amount of those. So I don't know. I think like this too shall pass, right? That mentality, I think, comes from being a sports fan.
Gracie told me he would disown me as a friend if I mentioned anything to do with the Bruins today. So
this is not a safe place to talk about it. It's still too raw. We almost faced this a similar scenario with the Celtics last night. They were on the brink of elimination. They forced a game 7, and so we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, man, no Bruins talk. That's tough.
Who are you following in the growth space? Like, how do you keep up to date and what's going on? Where's the inspiration come from?
Yeah, so I think by the nature of what I got going on the Academy team, again, partner, developer, some technical components, like who I follow, right? It's at the intersection of customer education, right? Leaders. I think customereducation.org is a phenomenal place that kind of consolidates a lot of those learnings. And then there's also just like partnership space, right? I think partnerships, leaders, and some other communities there. So it's like being involved in the discussions and having an eye on what's going on in both of those spaces, I find is critically important. But honestly, don't discount the following solutions partners themselves, right? Like, they're amplifying the messaging, they're amplifying and surfacing implications and ramifications of what's changing as it relates to growth teams and industry, generative AI. Partners are just driving with their perspectives. And so honestly, following the solutions partner ecosystem of HubSpot is a tremendous resource for me.
Do you ever think that, so, and just kind of come to me now, I'm not like teeing this up and there's no like pre-question that you've seen on this. Let's hope it's not too challenging, but that like you have, in effect, so you've built an education platform, which has then built a community, and then you are then using that community to feedback and influence the education and training. Do you think there's ever like a risk of almost creating like an echo chamber? So HubSpot, so like almost, if you think about it like a messaging cadence, inbound comes around, you started talking about connected platforms, partner community is geared up through education around those platforms. And that might be a shitty example, but like that then comes back and you're then using the community that you've educated and kind of pushed, and not pushed, but like shown the direction to then feed back into that. So do you think there's ever like a risk of creating an echo chamber there?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I would say yes, there's definitely a risk. I think there's some opportunities to mitigate that risk. And so I think, the signal of a good community is, open, honest, psychologically safe conversation, right? Like you don't want things sugar coated. You want real, raw feedback and inputs and perspectives. And so, hopefully by establishing the right, like communal culture, right, you can mitigate the risk of like the echo chamber and like, just the overly positive or conversations that aren't telling the whole picture. So there's some elements to that. But honestly, to your point, it can't only be the place in which you're having conversations, right? And so, from the customer education perspective, there's, a huge catalog of LMS providers, thought leaders around education. There's other SaaS companies that are building education programs themselves. There's other services providers who are helping trying to figure out how to layer in education as part of their menu. And so it's like, yeah, the community is super critical and important input, but it can't be the only place that you're having those conversations, right?
And I would say, speaking from experience and kind of insight knowledge, is the partner community are more than happy to challenge the status quo and the messaging as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. My favorite question. What's your biggest career fuck up to date? The one you learned the most from?
I guess it depends who you ask, right? Like who was on the other end of that. I don't know. I know I talked about it for a minute, but this was a good fuck up. It's the initial proposal for Agency Unfiltered. Again, I was in love with it. I'm like, we're going to do Facebook Live. It's going to be an hour. I thought it was going to be like a show where we could take questions from the audience in real time. And I'm going to fly these partners in for the studio, and it's going to be like super polished. But yeah, flying people in, the partner program is global, right? That's expensive. And then little did I know, asking founders, CEOs, owner executives of our agencies and services providers to give me an hour of their day over lunch, uninterrupted. It was a stupid ask, right? And so it's like, yeah, we didn't see a ton of great results out of the gate, but I think at the end of the day, man, all right, have fuck ups, right? But those should be treated as learning opportunities, not failures. And so what does that now inform? And so, I mean, look, Agency Unfiltered today. Listen, we're going to record remote. It's virtual. We're going to do audio only. It's going to be on demand, so folks can tune in at a point in which that's convenient for them. And like, it changed the game, and like it sent it in a completely different trajectory. But yeah, that initial plan, dude, major miss. Even Tom Brady throws interceptions sometimes. You know what I mean?
Not anymore. He's retired.
Nah,
but I think sometimes like it's easy to get carried away with like the shiny, the excitement, and I think there's a skill in itself of being able to come back to the MVP. How do I prove that this has got legs? And then we'll build off the back of that. But honestly, mate, I would have flown across the world for a Sam Adams and a lobster roll. You just need to ask.
Yeah, right. There's a restaurant by the office too. Some of the best grilled cheese and tomato soup lunch items I've ever had, But honestly, Rich, it goes back to your question too about how to sell, a commitment to education to like the C-suite, right? Like how do you achieve buy-in? Yeah. And to your point, like you don't have to start with the most overly produced, polished program. Find the MVP, right? Determine content or topics that matter. Get a sense of what the audience is looking for, what their expectations are, and then just pilot it out, right? Do something loose. Like you don't need a studio and a fancy Sony, like an FS5 camera and teleprompter. Dude, a nice mic, a nice ring light, and, some talking points and, see if there's an appetite for it and go from there, right? And so I wish I took that advice at the onset of this Agency Unfiltered idea, right?
Last question. Who should I talk to next?
Good question. Tom Brady, he's retired. Maybe he has some free time.
Yeah, I'm sure he's taking my calls. That's cool.
Yeah. I'll send him your way. I'll send him a note. Honestly, man, everyone's talking about generative AI. I feel like I just teed them up earlier. We had them on an episode of Agency Unfiltered. I know the Marketing AI Institute folks, like they've been part of this artificial intelligence conversation long before, right? The generative AI entered the cultural zeitgeist. And so they're fairly level-headed and informed and have a really strategic frame of reference around AI, use cases, the disruptions you should plan for, and like what operationalization of all that looks like. And so maybe that's the place you go next, man. The Marketing AI Institute.
I like it. Good recommendation. Dude, thank you for hanging out with me.
Kyle Jepson, you mentioned earlier, you watch his videos. Maybe dude's a stud.
I will reach out to Kyle as well. Dude, thank you for joining me on the 6 sessions. If anybody wants to follow up with you or even go and find the World Cert Day, like where should they go? Connect with you, Academy, where should they go?
Yep. I think worldcertificationweek.com will bring you to the event. And then in there, you'll see all the details, the charities we're supporting. We have a full calendar of events next week, sessions, panels, like how to maximize your team in your week for the event. So yeah, worldcertificationweek.com is going to get you there. You can search Agency Unfiltered on whatever podcast apps you prefer. It's on there. And then if anybody's interested in learning more about what Academy's got going on, what my team's got going on, pull me up, LinkedIn. I think it's HubSpot Kevin, I think is the LinkedIn kind of shorthand for me. So check it out. Find me there.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, dude. Always a pleasure. And I'm sure I'll see you again soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on, Rich. It's been fun, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, dude.